Welcome to the Disaster Planning for Your Business webinar. And this is brought to you by the U.S. Superyacht Association for our members, partners, and also prospective members. So if you are not yet a member of the U.S. Superyacht Association, this presentation today from Tom Serio is part of our continuing education series. And what we're going to be discussing, Tom comes to us with just an incredible background of over 30 years of experience in information technology with a focus on disaster recovery preparedness, business continuity planning, and crisis management. He is currently a principal and senior consultant at his firm, which is MTS and Associates. So today's presentation, Disaster Planning for Your Business. Disasters are happening all around us and they come in many forms. We're all, especially if you're in South Florida, very familiar with hurricanes, floods. I'm in the Midwest where tornadoes are happening all the time. And then, of course, there's fires, workplace violence. But really, it's the tragedies or the unexpected disruptions, such as protracted power or disruptions in communication, that are really the things that can wreak the most havoc on our businesses. So the question today is your business prepared to withstand a disruption of any type for just a number of hours, days, or possibly even weeks? Many of us will say, oh, I have great insurance, I know I'm covered. But, simply a planning for that insurance recovery check is not necessarily a plan. So today, Tom is going to be teaching us some key techniques in planning, preparedness, and recovery that will allow you a better chance of recovering critical business functions if some disaster should strike. He's also going to be sharing some very valuable real-life lessons. In his 30 years of experience, Tom spent 9 years, most recently, as the business continuity and disaster recovery team leader at Verizon Wireless. And so he worked with federal, state, and local public safety emergency responders, as well as enterprise customers. And Tom, I'll let you maybe tell us a little bit more about those experiences, but I know that you've been involved with volunteer organizations during events such as Hurricane Matthew in North Carolina, Superstorm Sandy in New York, and then also the wildfires in California and Washington. And then previous to that, I'm sure you may even tell us some examples of your time working for Office Depot, where you also supported awareness and preparedness efforts for small and medium-sized businesses across the country. And I know you probably got stories from Hurricane Wilma and even stories as one of the founders of the initial South Florida Disaster Resiliency Coalition, which is a private-public partnership between the 4 counties of Palm Beach, Broward, Miami-Dade, Monroe. Hopefully that was able to convey just how experienced Tom is in this area. And with that, Tom, I will turn it over to you to help us to learn how to invest a little time now that will hopefully save us a lot of time in the future. Tom Serio.
Thank you, Julie. Good afternoon, everybody. Great to be here. Thank you for joining this webinar. I got you here for an hour, and hopefully you can walk away from this presentation with some nuggets of information, some ideas, some processes that you can put in place in your own organization, because as Julie said, we spend a little time now, we are going to be able to survive that disaster later on. I am based down here in Florida. A lot of you know me as a photographer and writer in the boating industry. But as Julie mentioned, I have spent almost 30 years doing various sorts of disaster recovery, business continuity planning, crisis management, incident response, things like that for corporations, mainly the private sector, but also working with the public sector, FEMA, Homeland Security, state and county emergency operation folks. So what I've seen, though, I have seen a lot in this career. And I see where if we put a little effort up front, we can survive these disasters a lot better on the backside. So we're going to talk about that today. Feel free to jot a note down or ask a question with any thoughts you may have or anything you want to know in particular. But I'll give you a quick idea about my background here, because you probably figured out this is a New York accent. So like half of the folks here in Florida, we're all from New York. So I started my career in IT back with King Cullen Grocery, which is a grocery company up on Long Island. I spent a few years there in IT, and then I moved to a company called PCH. Now, PCH stands for Publishers Clearinghouse. If you don't learn anything else today, learn this, that anytime you get a piece of mail from Publishers Clearinghouse, always send it back, because real people do win those contests. Okay, so there we go. That's your value play for today. I spent 10 years there at PCH in IT, and then moved on into heading up their disaster recovery program. And then I spent 10 years there, moved to Sendint, which was a hospitality company. I did their international domestic disaster recovery and business continuity planning. And then from there, I moved to Cablevision. And then a friendly headhunter called me up and said, hey, I got a great job for you down in Florida, heading up, being the global business continuity director for Office Depot. Office Depot was of course, in the U.S. and over in Europe. And I said, great, came down here in 2003, just before the 04-05 hurricane season, which you folks probably realize was pretty significant with the amount of storms. We're going to talk more about that in a minute. Did 5 years at Office Depot, then went to Verizon Wireless. And then with Verizon, I was a leader for the business continuity and disaster recovery team, and also headed up the outreach program, where we educated folks on how to deal with disasters, especially communications, of course, how to deal with communications before and after a disaster. And communication's key. I don't know anybody nowadays who doesn't have a phone, an iPad, a laptop, whatever it may be, with them. And of course, when it goes down or not available, everybody goes crazy. So we have to focus on communication on those devices. So we'll talk about that in a minute. I just finished up with 9 years with Verizon last year, and I struck out on my own, doing consulting in the disaster field, but also getting more into my writing and photography business. So I'm really managing two careers at once, which I really have done for the past 15 years or so. So that gives me credibility. When I do go to disasters, I bring my camera. I've got thousands of photos from disaster sites of tornadoes and fires, and seeing what the impact is. We're pretty fortunate here in Florida, and I tell you why. Because here, of course, we get the hurricanes, but the beauty of a hurricane is that we can see them coming. Right? You don't see the earthquake coming. You barely have time to get out of the way of a fire. Sometimes the floods just come right up your door into your house. The hurricanes, well, at least we have some time to prepare for them and be able to respond accordingly, either shoring up our resources or getting out of town. So the objective of today's presentation, I am not here trying to sell you anything. This is a value-added program that the USSA puts on. We want this to be a learning experience. So I do have a lot of advice to give. And of course, if you have any questions later on, you can always reach out to me, reach out to the USSA. We'll put you in touch if you want to continue this conversation at a later time. So some thoughts about getting through my career. I thought, or I wanted to get through my career without ever having to go to a disaster. Well, that changed when I moved to Florida. I thought I wrote some really good disaster plans when I lived in New York. Never had to implement any. But when coming down here to Florida, when I went through my first disaster, Hurricane Wilma was my first disaster on a corporate level. I realized that I'm not a great planner. My plans went pretty much out the window. Okay, disasters never go exactly as planned. I thought they would, and they really don't. And a lot happens while you're making plans. You think you've got everything covered, and you got to find holes or things. Oh, I never thought of that. Oh, I didn't do this. And I got caught on that a few times. I got that little bite in the butt there saying, oh, you forgot to take care of this. And we learn from those lessons. And if I could share those lessons with you so you don't get caught in the same things, that's great. Now, you're going to sit there and say, Tom, you're a corporate guy. You're with Verizon, Office Depot, big corporations. You know what, though? Disaster planning and business continuity is very scalable. I can write a plan for a 2,000-person company. I can write a plan for a 20-person company. It's very scalable. It really depends on what you want to put in there, what you want to address. In the old days, in my corporate days, I would create a big binder full of information for everybody. But when I talk to small businesses, I talk to companies, 10 people, 20 people, 50 people. Your plan may only be 10 pages long, and that's okay, as long as you've got a plan, because you don't know what's going to be happening when that proverbial stuff hits the fan, and you've got to take that plan and start executing it. So I've got my forecasting stone here, a little picture here, and I look out my window every morning and I take a look and I see if the stone is wet, it's raining. If the stone is dry, it's not raining. If there's a shadow, it's sunny. If there's white on top, it's snowing. If I can't see it, it's foggy. If it's swinging wildly, it's windy. And if it's jumping up and down, there's an earthquake. And if it's gone, well, we pretty much have a hurricane. So I know I talk about hurricanes down here in Florida, but I am going to take an all-risk approach to this because I know some of you folks are not in Florida, you're in other parts of the country, but there are risks all around here. I mentioned, though, 2005 was a very active year for hurricanes, and I know it's a long time ago, but I wanted to show this here that was a year where we had 28 named storms. That was a year we had to go into the Greek alphabet to get names for storms because we ran out of names in the regular alphabet. That's the year that, if you look on the chart there, we had Wilma, of course, also we had Katrina rather, and then Rita, which hit the Gulf Coast there. Of course, you know that. And then Wilma, of course, came across the Florida Peninsula, and that's what impacted us here down here in South Florida. But you can see that, and I when I talk to regular businesses, I don't talk about so much the storms in the middle of the Atlantic, but for the Superyacht Association, you guys have a business that goes across the Atlantic. You've got yachts that travel, you've got ships that travel with your yachts, you've got commerce going back and forth. You've got to pay a little attention to what we call the fish storms. The fish storms is a storm that starts in the ocean and ends up in the ocean, doesn't hit land. But you've got to pay attention because that could impact your business also. What if we have a cargo ship that's got to get out of the way of a hurricane, and now it's going to be 2 or 3 weeks delayed getting to port? What if we have brand new yachts coming here to Florida for the boat shows, and the ship gets delayed getting out of the way of a hurricane? That has an impact to your business. What do you do about that? So not every disaster has to be dust and rubble. It could be a disaster to your process, a disaster to your supply chain. Okay, what is it that's going to put you out of a business function? Now we have a forecast out for 2019, and I don't believe in forecasts. I say, look, if the number is going to be greater than 0, then we have to be ready. Nobody ever has told me the number is going to be 0. Tom, we're never going to have any hurricanes this year. And when that happens, I'm out of a job. But that's okay. I don't mind. But we've got to be ready. So, we've got to look at an average year here. We've got 13 storms, 6 hurricanes, 2 major hurricanes. Major hurricanes are Category 3 and above. Regular hurricanes, Categories 1 to 2. And then you can see the percentages of what they think is going to hit the U.S., the Panhandle, the Gulf Coast area, and the Caribbean. This presentation today is timely. Why? We've got 2 systems out there in the Atlantic right now that likely are not going to be anything, but it's kind of an eye-opener, and it should be an awareness saying, we've got a system that's going to impact Florida and the lower East Coast this weekend with a lot of rain. They're talking about from Friday to Sunday, a little low-pressure system. But there's another system behind it that's coming across that's probably be a little bit stronger when it gets here. We are now getting into peak season here. Hurricane season runs from June 1st to November 30th. But peak season starts in August. The peak time of hurricane season is around September 10th. So we've got to be ready for that. Now we see the Atlantic heating up. We talk about climate change and how the oceans are getting warmer, the air's getting warmer. That's all good stuff to produce energy for these storms. So we've got to be aware of what's happening. And if you didn't know, on the Pacific Ocean right now, they are up to, I think, the 5th named storm already. We've got 2 storms out there on the Pacific heading towards Hawaii. Should miss Hawaii, but heading towards that area. Okay, so we've got to be aware of what's happening. So this is a good conversation to have. Why? Because with these couple of storms out there, with the peak of hurricane season coming here for not just Florida, the Gulf Coast states, the East Coast, and of course hurricanes can go inland also. We've got to get ready. We've got to make sure our plans are there. We've got to make sure our people are knowledgeable, that if things do go wrong, we've got to be ready for it. There are a lot of folks that live here in Florida that weren't here back in 2005 and don't know or understand the impact of a hurricane and what's going to happen. They think it's going to, when the wind starts blowing, they're going to get right back to work. Well, not so much. So let's look at risk a little bit. You really need to think about a risk matrix for your business, wherever you may be and whatever you may be doing. What are the probabilities versus the risk? Down here in Florida, you're right, it's all about hurricanes. There's a high probability and a high risk for hurricanes. In California, they don't worry about hurricanes so much. They worry about earthquakes and wildfires and blackouts, maybe not in that order. So, you've got to look where you are located and what your local risks are and what the probability is. Okay, yeah, we can have a high probability for hurricanes here in Florida, not so much a high probability for earthquakes, although there is a risk for earthquakes here because we are in a little ring of fire down here with the Caribbean islands. Local and national concerns are the same. Yeah, the hurricanes. Yeah, the severe weather. I mean, we saw a lot of flooding in the Midwest this spring from the heavy, heavy rains and in addition to the snow melt. So the rivers, the Missouri River, the Mississippi River, were flooding, going over their banks, all the estuaries that feed into there, all right? That put a lot of businesses underwater, literally underwater. Okay, if that was your business, you're out of business. What you got to be thinking about is, what do I need to do before a disaster happens to keep me in business and make the disaster transparent to the customer? Okay, we talk about the fires. We saw huge fires in California last year, but fires happen in every state. They happen down here. They happen across the country. Social violence, is a big thing. Active shooters. We just saw another situation here just the other day, and it's happening all the time. And if you didn't realize this, understand something. If you have an active shooter situation in your workplace, in your office, in your boatyard, and people get injured or killed, when the police or FBI comes in to your property, they take over your property. You cannot run your business while they have control of your property. It's basically a crime scene. When you look at the Parkland shooting down here at Marjorie Stoneman High School a year and a half ago, the police for weeks had that school locked down, where they couldn't even retrieve the students' belongings out of the classrooms. So what does that mean to you? What if something happened on your campus and the police came in and shut you down where you couldn't move? Do you have backup systems? Do you have backup tapes? Do you know what your processes are? Do you know what the key things you need to be running first, second, and third? That's part of your planning. So when something happens, you can pick up the plan, go somewhere else, start executing, and bring your business back up. We have impacts to infrastructure. We're seeing power outages. Between the hot weather is causing power outages up in the Northeast, and California typically has power outages. What about the water? Fort Lauderdale just had a water main break a week and a half ago. So basically it shut the water down. Now people are like, well, we don't need water in an office building. Well, yes, you do. You need it for the air conditioning, you need it for toilets, you need it for washing hands, things like that. Without water in a building, you're not going to run your business. And what's the impact of the roads, the telecom? When the poles go down and your phones don't work anymore, now what do you do? We're seeing more and more about cyber terrorism and hacking, things like that. I think it was in the news this morning. Capital One just had a hack. Somebody stole 100 million records or whatever it was. I mean, come on. I mean, how are companies still getting away with this? You don't want your company on the front page of the Wall Street Journal because you were hacked, or your customer information or your employee information is out there now. And of course, family and personal issues. You've got people that are disgruntled, they're getting divorced, they've got issues, they can't make it financially, and they're creating a part of the risk for your workplace. And you say, okay, Tom, that's great, but tell me more about this disaster stuff. Well, disaster recovery and business continuity are basically two different practices in the business world. And disaster recovery really came out of the IT area. And basically it was being able to recover your IT infrastructure that supports the business. Okay. If I lose my data center, where can I rebuild it? Where are my backup tapes? Did I make a backup of my data? Are they on tapes? Are they off site? Where can I recover them? That's what a disaster recovery plan is. Conversely, a business continuity plan is designed to help facilitate the recovery of your critical business functions and operations. So at Office Depot, I'm there. I got 2,200 people on campus. I could recover the data center. But when we had to shut down the campus for Hurricane Wilma, we had plans on how to recover the critical business functions. Do you have that? It may be as simple as saying, you have it in your head. You say, okay, well, Susie, you do that, and Joan, you do that, and Bobby, you do that, and that's great. Here's the problem. What if you're not available? What if you're not there to lead the charge? Okay, we've got to have plans in place so people know what they can do. Part of the plans are having teams, all right? People that are identified to be responsible for certain functions. Large corporations, yeah, you can have an executive team with the CEO, the executives and things like that. But you know something? If you're a 10 or 20 person company, the boss, the owner may be the executive team. Your boss and one other person may be that. So you can make this very scalable. Don't be afraid of what's on the page here. Say, okay, how can I adapt that to my business? You can have a core business team of 2 employees, right? 2 or 3 people are going to be the ones who manage the disaster while everybody else is maintaining business or packing up business to move, right? A crisis management team, maybe somebody from each department, to be in charge. Who's going to respond to the incident? You don't want everybody coming back to the office day one if you don't know what happened, okay? Do a proper assessment. And then who's on your disaster team and your business continuity team? So, you're a small business. This is great. This is not very difficult to do. It could be one person or two people. In the corporate world, we can have a few more folks there. And they need to have some plans there, okay? A crisis management team plan. All right, what are the processes and what's the information for the crisis team to follow in preparation or responding to an event? Okay, so who's out there? Who do we need to help mitigate the situation? Who do we need to help to assess the situation? You may be an owner of a boatyard, okay, and you've got on any given day 100 to 200 employees and contractors that come on premises. Well, what if you got trees down? What if you have wires down? What if you've been flooded? You don't want these folks coming there, but you want somebody from your team to come in and do a good assessment to make sure you've got that information. A home security program. I know some companies, they will actually pay to have the executives' homes boarded up and shuttered so they can stay at business, and even for their crisis team. So basically the idea there is what are you doing to help your folks protect the business? Okay, are you helping them shutter their homes? Are you helping them get out of town? Are you educating them before the disaster? And we're going to talk about that in a minute. And by the way, we will make these slides available to you through the USSA. We're working out with Julie, and we'll make sure you guys can get a copy of this deck. And of course, other plans, corporate communications. You're having a bad day because of a disaster, and then Channel 10 News shows up and puts a microphone in your face and asks you what's going on. Okay, well, are you allowed to talk to the media? Or do you have a spokesperson to talk to the media? Who's talking to the employees? How are they finding out what's going on? Who's managing your other facilities? You may have multiple boatyards. It could be one of these companies that manages 5 boatyards, right? Who's managing each one individually, because things can happen to different locations at different times. Maybe your corporate plan. So there are a lot of things you can have plans for, and I'm not saying that they have to be hundreds of pages long. Just because you have a thick binder doesn't mean you have a good plan. I'd rather see a very small binder with a good plan, comprehensive plan in it, than a big thick thing sitting on the desk, the credenza, where somebody says, yeah, we got a disaster plan, it's right there. Yeah, the last time I looked at it was 5 years ago. Well, that's not good. That's not good for anybody. So a lot coming out here, a little bit more now. Let's get into some of the creative parts that's going to help you identify what's critical for your business. What you need to do, first and foremost, is you need to do a BIA. And a BIA is a business impact analysis. What you need to figure out is what is critical to your business. Okay, and I've done BIAs for a lot of businesses. I've done some in my consulting work. And you'd be surprised how many people identify the fact that, you know what, maybe my function is not critical to be back up the day after a disaster. Maybe I can wait 3 days. Maybe I can wait 5 days. Maybe I've manufactured enough widgets and they're in inventory where I don't need to bring my manufacturing floor back up and running for 7 days. Okay, but you don't know that until you sit down and say, okay, what's my impact? I would love to keep accounts receivable going, okay, because I need to have money coming in. But accounts payable, yeah, you know what? I'll push that out 14 days. Okay, my vendors will understand if I don't pay them for another week or two that we're having a disaster. We're good for the money, but just got to give us a little time. So you perform a BIA, so you understand what the business needs are, and then you create a gap analysis. So what's that mean? Is that you have to understand what the differences are between the business needs and the IT services or functions. Now you can have a business person say, hey, I need my application back up and running in 12 hours after disaster because we're running an online system and we're web-based and we've got to be back up and running because if not, we're going to lose the $10,000 every hour we're down. Okay. Now the IT guy turns around and says, well, based on our recovery scheme, I don't have you coming back up and running for 48 hours. Ooh, there's a gap. Okay, and you need to identify those gaps because you need to maintain the business. And what you need to do is figure out how to close the gap. Either the business person can say, okay, well, instead of 10 or 12 hours, I can go 24 hours. And then the IT guy says, well, instead of 48 hours, I could change the rotation of the restores or backups, and I can have you back up in 30 hours. So now you're closing the gap. Maybe it'll cost you a little bit of money. Maybe it'll cost you a little bit of change of process. But you need to identify the gap and try to close the gap, because I'm going to tell you right now, if the first time a business person sees that gap analysis is that time of disaster, that could be a career decision for a lot of people. So if you can identify that up front and start closing that gap now on the blue sky day, then you're going to be eligible to recover from these disasters on the gray sky days, when the proverbial stuff is hitting the fan. So you also need to know who's needed and when and for what. Okay. Back at Office Depot, we had to declare a disaster after Hurricane Wilma in 2005. We had a campus with 3 buildings, 2,200 employees. Hurricane Wilma came through. The backside of that storm came through, knocked down a lot of trees, took power out of 2 out of 3 of the buildings on the campus. I had 2,200 employees. I don't need everybody coming back in the next day. So we decided to declare a disaster on campus. We came out and implemented all of our business continuity plans. And taking those plans, we knew exactly how many people I needed for each department and where they were going to go on day 1, day 2, day 4, day 6, day 10, 2 weeks, 4 weeks, whatever it was. So we had already created that plan. You can do that very simply. Okay, who do I need the first day? You got 10 employees. Okay, you're not going to get everybody in the first day. You don't want everybody in the first day. Right? You're still doing an assessment, things like that. But you need to also think that, hey, if I bring in 2 people the first day, I'll bring in 4 people the next day. Oh, when those first 2 people go home, I'll bring in 2 other people. So you need to start thinking about how you're going to rotate your team, but also who's critical to doing recovery, because it's not business as usual after a disaster. Understand the ways you can get a hold of your employees. So I got burned by this. I'll be honest with you. I got burned by this with Hurricane Katrina. I was working for Office Depot. We had stores and warehouses that were impacted in the Gulf Coast area. We only had basically the person's name, home phone number, and cell phone number. And I think even to this day, we weren't able to find everybody, okay, because we didn't have enough information. Well, Hurricane Rita came 4 weeks after Hurricane Katrina in 2005. I told you, a very busy year. By the time Hurricane Rita came, we were able to find every single employee in the impact area. Why? Because in those 4 short weeks, we not only verified their home information, their cell phone information, we wanted to know if they were married or had a spouse living with them. We wanted their phone number, and other information. We asked for their personal email. So because somebody's more apt to get on Gmail or Yahoo.com than they are to getting on OfficeDepot.com or Boats.com, whatever it may be. Okay, so I wanted to have everything in my power where I could find my employees. I wanted to know if a family member who lived out of town they're likely to call. But chances are they're letting them know, hey, hey, Mom, we're going to go through a hurricane here. I'll call you in 2 days, let you know how you made out. So I want the odds on my side because I want to be able to find my employees. You want to be able to find your employees. Okay, you've got a business to run, but you also worry about their well-being. Okay, so make sure you have good information in your contact list. I'm going to tell you right now, it costs nothing to get that. Yeah, I know employees are going to say, well, that's private information. Well, I'll tell you what, I can go to the internet, spend $20 and find all the information I want about you. So you're helping them. You're helping them to say, hey, we're going to reach out and try to find you in case you need help during a disaster. And develop your recovery procedures. What's executable? All right. When you have a disaster plan, I know a lot of times when we have disaster plan, the first couple of chapters in the book are fluff. I call them, the administrative stuff. You may get to chapter 5, and the chapter 5 is the executable part of the plan. Well, that's where your procedures go, and people have to know that. At disaster time, go right to chapter 5, start executing. So we have a lot of concerns about communication. One is communicating to your employees. Okay, how do we tell them what's going on? If we have a hurricane here, if we have a fire coming down in Paradise, California, or other places, if we have flooding here happening in the Midwest, in Iowa and Missouri and places like that, how do we let employees know what's going on? If we're going to be open or closed, or if they need help, they can respond. Set up an 800 number. They're not expensive at all, and you set it up with your local carrier, and you put it in the cloud, and you say, okay, employees, here's our 800 number, our disaster hotline. Call this number for more information during the disaster. Call it call it after the disaster. So here's what I learned. We had an 800 number at Office Depot, and it was great. It worked very well for a couple of events until Hurricane Wilma. When the power went out, our PBX went down, and so did my 800 number. Oops, lesson learned. Okay, so if you're going to do an 800 number, don't house it in the facility that you're recovering. That you are recovering. Put it out in the cloud. Verizon, AT&T, all those landline guys will be more than happy to set up an 800 number. Use daily email updates, video messaging, notification tools. There's a lot of ability out there to do that. The basic problem here is the last mile. All this stuff is used with devices, phones and pads and everything else. So, use that, but also make sure that to tell people that, look, if we're really bad and we cannot communicate in our area, because that's ground zero for the disaster, then we need to get out of the area. Okay? And you may want to have a plan for that. You may want to have a secondary location. You may already have a secondary location that you never thought of using as your main location in a disaster. Well, now's a great time to take that thought, put that process together, and use it. and understand who can talk to the media. I mentioned this before. Certain people just are not good in front of a camera or a microphone. We all kind of get shaky knees and things like that. And I'm going to tell you the one guy or one person you don't want to have talking to the media the first time, and that is your owner or CEO of your company. Why? Because if they say something wrong, there's nobody else who can correct them, right? But if the PR person or the HR person, if they say they're on TV or radio and they say something incorrect, well, at least then the CEO can come back in and say, no, they weren't correct. We've got better information, and here we go. So they can dance around and fix the issue. But I've seen too many times where companies put the executives on the phone or in front of a microphone first. They say the wrong thing, and they look like idiots, plain and simple. So, but you have to know what people have to say. So what you want to do also then is to build a communication strategy matrix. Basically, it is just a quick matrix to figure out what is it that we need to say, who do we need to say it to, who is the owner of it internally who has to get the information together, how often do we say it, and what are we saying? So in my world, this is an actual template that we use at Office Depot after we figured out a couple of times that we were chasing our messaging too much. We had to make it a lot easier. So we created this where the channel was we sent out weekly status updates to our target audience, who are our North American associates, and our internal communications people within the company owned that. They are the ones who had to put that together and get it out every week by close of business on a Wednesday. And basically the information there was talking about general relief efforts, strategies, donations, things like that. If you put this together now, everybody will know exactly what has to be said, when it has to be said, who has to get the information together, and when you put it out. Nice and simple. You can take this template, cross off the information I have, put in your own things here, and now you've got a communication strategy. You can create your own scripts. So if somebody has to talk to the media or put in a press release out, you know exactly what they're going to say. You can basically write the script and just fill in the blanks later on. It's tough trying to get people to approve things during a disaster where, I've been in companies where the executives all wanted to approve press releases before they went out. Try to find an executive during a disaster. They're gone. So we pre-scripted everything. They approved everything ahead of time. And then our PR guy can just fill in the blanks and send it when he wanted to. So this is the kind of stuff that's going to save you a lot of aggravation. If you're a small company, maybe you're only talking to your vendors and the local news. Maybe you don't have a big presence with employees. And that's okay. That's okay. Take this as a template. Say, yeah, Tom, I can use this. I can shape it the way I want to. And you know what? It costs you nothing to set up. And now you're that much better off today than you were yesterday in being prepared for a disaster. So a big thing in my life has been telecom. Your phones, your devices. What are the communication carriers doing for you? I got to tell you, a lot of times I go into companies and I ask people, I say, who's your carrier? Oh, I don't know, Sprint, T-Mobile, and people don't know, because they may be using their own device. They may have been given a device from the company that stays in their briefcase, and they don't know who the carrier is. Okay. The point here is you need to know who your carrier is and what they're going to do for you. Right? All these wireless companies, even the wireline companies, are all the same. They have plans. They have a process of what they're going to do at disaster time. You may fit in that process, or you may not. A lot of times when I was doing this with Verizon, fire departments, police, hospitals were very high on the pecking order. Boatyards weren't. Okay, but if that's the case, that's fine. You need to understand where you stand on the pecking order, so you know what you can do with that. Okay, well, if my carrier is not going to restore my cell service here for a long time, I've got to go to Plan B, and let's figure out what Plan B is. Plan B may be satellite phones. Plan B may be getting out of the area where you can't communicate to an area where you can communicate. Okay, so you've got to start thinking out of the box a little bit. So what assets do they have? A lot of these companies here, and of course these are pictures on Verizon, but they've got mobile generators. They got what we call cows. That's a cell on wheels. That is a mobile device, a mobile trailer or truck, like you see on the right side, that we can put up a mast and put an antenna on it and bring the signal back where we lost signal. We didn't have signal before. This was instrumental when you look at places like the Keys with Hurricane Irma, getting communications going back down the chain of the islands down to the Keys. So, but find out, talk to your carrier and ask them, how many cows and colts do you have? A colt is a cell on light truck. The cow is a cell on wheels. And you know what? I'm telling you right now, if they don't want to tell you what they have, then you need to think about getting a new carrier. Okay. My job was to tell people what we have. I know the guys at Sprint, I know the guys at AT&T. They should be telling you, but sometimes they don't want to tell you. Oh, well, don't worry about it. Well, I worry about it because I have a business to run here. How are you guys going to keep me on the air? What assets do you have? What's our link to the internet here? You guys may turn around and say, well, we do everything on landline, but if we have a disaster and we lose a landline, we can go with a satellite backup. Okay. Now you know. Now you say, okay, now we can stay where we are because we've got a satellite backup link. That may cost a little bit more, but it will keep me online and working in our location. Because the worst thing you want to do, actually, even though you can do it, the worst thing you want to do is relocate your whole business to another location. That's a disruption to the process, a disruption to the families. And here it is about the families, okay? What do you want to do to help protect the family? You want those employees coming back, okay? So if you can help them prepare and put together a program that's going to identify what they need, what should be in their disaster kit, what personal information should be in that disaster kit, that's going to help them survive the disaster. That's going to bring them back to business that much faster. It's a win-win for everybody in my book, okay? We can talk all day about disaster kits. I'm not going to get too crazy about it. I'm going to tell you, I just updated mine last week. We've got 2 big blue crates. One's got food items, dry good items, can items, can opener. Don't forget the can opener. The other one's got all our important papers. Got a copy of my deed, copy of my insurance, copy of my pay stubs, copy of everything, copy of my passport, so you can re-identify yourself. You don't know how bad things are going to get. I have seen disasters where people literally only had the shirts on their backs, where their homes burned down to the ground, and they didn't have anything. They were told to evacuate. When a fireman knocks on your door and says, "Hey, you got 10 minutes to get out of your house," what are you grabbing? You're grabbing some money. You're grabbing the kids. You may be grabbing your spouse. Depends. But, you're not thinking about, oh, where's my insurance papers? Where's my deed? To prove that I own this house. You need a copy of that stuff. When you go to the bank or a small business administration looking for a loan after the disaster, if you can't prove that you own that house or have an income, that's going to be that much harder. So think about this stuff. Put that personal information together, any medications, of course, that you have. What about Fluffy? What about your pets? I know a lot of people who will not evacuate if they can't take their pets with them. Okay? Hey, figure that out. You've got to figure out what to do about your animals. If you're going to evacuate, say, oh, I'll evacuate South Florida. I'll go to Georgia and find a hotel in Atlanta. Well, not every hotel takes animals. Okay? You need to figure that out ahead of time because otherwise you're going to be sleeping in your car with your cat or your dog. So let's figure that out early. And you have time now before a disaster. You figure that out. Educate everybody through lunch and learns, expos. The Red Cross would love to come in and do a lunch and learn with your team. Hey, how do we prepare ourselves? Even, doing CPR classes and things like that. That's all positive stuff. But things go, people have situations during disasters. So, have these expos. Let's identify what the family issues are. What we did at Office Depot was once a year we had our hazard fair. What we did was we brought in vendors and government agencies and weathermen and fire police to educate the employees on how to be prepared for the disaster so they can survive the storm and come back to work that much faster. So we put them in touch with the fire. They gave demonstrations, ADT security, the insurance department, the county, Energizer gave out flashlights, insurance company, FPL, a local power company here, shutter services. As you know, we have shutters on our windows and doors down here in Florida for the hurricanes. The local weatherman came in, and that's him at the podium, did a presentation. That was a nice little drawer, and we had raffles, stuff like that. But that didn't cost really anything because I charged the vendors to come in and do this. So it cost me nothing. It cost the company nothing, but it gave a lot of goodwill. It got employees ready. It got people coming back to work that much faster. It got the employees to see that, hey, the company cares. Okay, and that's a big seller in our business, is when an employee can see that the company cares about them, they'll go the extra mile for you. So just a few more here. Department functions under BCPs. You got to remember, it is not BAU. It is not business as usual. Okay, things aren't going to be the same. Departments are going to have to change procedures. When we went into disaster mode at Office Depot, we changed hours. We were working 6-hour shifts starting at 6 a.m. until midnight because people had to reuse areas because we didn't have enough workspace for everybody. Right? Your plans and your knowledge base are going to be stressed at times. You're going to realize that some of your plans that you thought were good aren't quite working real well in a real situation. That's okay. Let's write that. Let's document that. Let's update that. And you can see people are getting stressed. It's a tough situation during a disaster. People are worried about home. They're worried about their children, the safety of their families, things like that. What am I doing about them, much less what am I doing about work? Because I can tell you right now, if people have a situation at home where their families aren't safe, they're not coming back to work right away. Okay? You're trying to run the business, they're trying to take care of their families, right? You want to keep that disaster transparent to your customer. On the retail side, I didn't want people in California realizing we're having a disaster in Florida. I wanted to keep my stores open and keep selling products, okay? You may want to be able to do the same thing. You want to be able to move slips. You want to be able to keep on manufacturing yachts and things like that, whatever it is, or having a provisioning service. You don't want your customers seeing that the disaster is impacting you, because your customers will go somewhere else, and that's not good for our business. So a few other issues here. Locating employees. What happened to them during or after the disaster? In my business, I've had to go out looking for employees, which means I'm given an address, go to this location and see if they're still there, see if they're still alive. Okay, and sometimes it's a tough task, because you don't know what you're going to find. Thankfully, I found everybody I went looking after, but make sure your employees know that, hey, if we don't call you, if we can't get a hold of you, you need to try calling us. Okay, I'll call the 800 number, and if you hit option 10 or option 0, you can leave a message saying that you're fine or you need help. What's my resource availability? In our disasters, I don't care if it's a fire, the flood, wherever you may be around the country, we all need the same resources. We all want fuel for our generators and food and water and ice. Okay, what's that availability? Who's setting up a pod, a distribution center, so my employees can get ice and water for their families and for themselves? Okay, because we had those same issues in the impact areas. Okay, how am I going to, if I'm going to bring employees back, but schools aren't open, what do we do about childcare, daycare, feeding the employees? Employees are going to turn around and say, hey, I'm not coming to work because I only have a half tank of gas in my car, and I need to save that in case my kid has to go to the hospital. Okay. One thing that we did in my last job was that we got a tanker truck full of gas, put it behind the building. We gave everybody 10 seconds on the nozzle every night. Here's enough gas for you to get home. Here's enough gas for you to get back tomorrow. So you got to figure out what the issues are and how you're gonna mitigate those. What about our pre-disaster plans? And what about a closing plan? We try to keep business up and running as long as possible, but sometimes we've got to close business. When that fire was within 5 miles of my facility, I need to be sending people home. When I've got a hurricane and they're going to lock down the bridges and close the school districts, I need to send employees home. Okay, you need to figure out what those triggers are for you, so you're not second guessing a time of disaster. That's the worst time to be messing around with it. Oh, should we close? Should we not close? No, define your triggers, figure it out. And how do we evacuate? Where do we go to? Do we go to a secondary location? Do we just tell everybody to go work from home? Is that a good plan? It might be for you, may not be for somebody else. So talk about public-private partnerships. I'm not going to go through everything here, but basically what we need to be doing is talking across the table. And public-private partnerships are the private sector businesses talking with the government agencies, your counties, your states. What can we do together? How can we plan together? How can we recover together? But in addition, there are private partnerships. How can businesses work together to help business get back into business? You guys with boat yards, you got a lot of the same stuff. If I lost my boat yard today and I got 3 boats to haul, why can't I send them to your yard and have my guys come to your yard and work on the boats? Is that a possibility? Maybe, but now is the time we need to be thinking about this. Okay, how do we help each other? How do we do a mutual aid agreement in the Superyacht industry, from the builder down to the provisioner down to the cleaning company? Okay, we should be able to figure this out. I know we can do this. I've done this before. I've seen it happen before. If we just step back and say, okay, here's what we need to be doing together. I've given presentations over the past couple of weeks in person to some groups, and some of these guys are really getting it. Like, oh yeah, we can do that. We can be a help here, or we may need somebody else over here. Why not put it together now? Let's sit down, have lunch together, talk about it, and say, okay, when you come out of this room, here's our new agreement. We're going to work with the government agencies here. We're going to get information from the county here about when they're going to do things. And now I'm going to work with the other businesses here to say, okay, if I have a problem, I can come to your facility. If you have a problem, I've got space for you in my facility. Okay? This is how we have to get around. I'm not waiting for the government to come up with solutions. They can be part of the solution. I don't want them driving my business solution, because government doesn't understand business all the time. Business understands business. You guys understand each other. Why aren't we working better together? I know we can do it. So that's just kind of just putting that out there to say, look, we can be smarter about this. And even though you didn't learn that maybe in your executive class or your master's class or whatever, we've got to be doing this better because, something, we're in it together. The bottom line here is you want to make sure that your bottom line is unimpacted. I need to, we're business people. We need to show growth, revenue, numbers, everything on the positive, on the black side, not the red side. Okay, I don't want to have my bottom line impacted by a disaster. Yeah, there's going to be some costs associated with it. Yeah, there may be an insurance claim that has to be processed, but that's okay. Figure it out. Let's talk to your risk manager or your insurance guy and say, okay, if I have a disaster, how do I pay my employees? Well, you need a business interruption policy. Okay, let me have it. How do I pay for this stuff? If I have a disaster, I have to put in a claim. What can I put in as a claim? And know that now before you go in. Understand what your insurance policy covers and doesn't cover. Insurance policies are the worst things in the world. Okay, I'm sure they're designed by lawyers who don't want you to understand the whole thing. And I apologize to any lawyer out there, but you've got to understand what is covered, what is damaged by wind and or rain. Why do I need flood insurance versus regular insurance and things like that? If the water comes from the top on the bottom up, that's one thing. Comes from the top down, that's something totally different. Okay, you want to return to business as usual as soon as possible. You want to get back into the swing of things. You want to get back into your process going. You want to get back your employees going. You want to have payroll going again. Your local municipality wants tax revenue coming in again. You want to get back into business. And the faster you get back into business, the better chances are you're going to keep your business and maybe even get more business, right? Because the guy down the block didn't plan properly. He's not back in business yet. All right, be flexible with your plans and execution. All right, the answers have too many variables. Plans are great. Be flexible with your plans. If things aren't going the way your plan is, let's update the plan for next time. That's okay. But our job is to keep our companies on the front page of the Wall Street Journal. Right now, Capital One is on the front page of the Wall Street Journal. They're getting their butts kicked because of this hacking problem. Okay, you don't want to be there. It's not good for business. It's not good for your shareholders, your stock value, any of that stuff. So when it comes to this, in a big as small of a business we are, I don't want my business on the front page of the local paper. You don't want your business there. We've got to mitigate the situation. Just one other thought. Companies love to do business with other companies that have disaster plans. So use your disaster plan as a marketing tool. All right, let people in other businesses see that, hey, we've got our disaster plan. In the light of, if we have a hurricane in Florida, if we have a fire in California, here's what we're going to do to make sure that we stay in business to provide you your services. Right? It's a great marketing tool. Don't lose sight of that either. So we talked a lot here. We got about a few minutes left here. We'll take some questions on the chat. But I hope you got something out of it. You've got my phone number here, my email here also. Feel free to drop me a line if you have a question, a thought. If you want to do a review of your current plans and your facility, I can be more than happy to work with you on that. So I hope this helped you out and gave you some better insight. Even though I am a good photographer in the marine industry, I am still passionate about my disaster field. Julie, you there? You want to take it away?
I am. Wow, Tom. Thank you. That was wonderful. What a wealth of information. It sounds like I think I have a lot of planning to do. We don't currently have any questions that have been submitted in chat, but I do see that we still have about a dozen people on. If anyone would like to submit any questions in the chat area, now's the time to do so. If there are no questions, then you can look forward to the replay. And Tom, you did say that we could also send out perhaps a copy of your slides.
Yes. Well, I'll make a PDF available to you, and we can get that out in the next day or so.
Okay, great. Well, then we will be sending out an email to everyone who has attended and those that registered but did not attend. And we will have that up hopefully in the next 24 hours. I would say give us 36 just to be safe. And we'll send along both the replay video and the slides. Thank you so much, Tom. That was wonderful. And thank you all for joining us on behalf of both Tom Serio, the business continuity and disaster recovery specialist, also wonderful photographer, and myself, Julie Perry, and of course the U.S. Superyacht Association, which you can learn more about by visiting ussuperyacht.com. Thank you so much and have a wonderful afternoon. Bye-bye.